I've often thought about it. I mean, I'm fixated on it, but I've often thought about the fact that the commandment is thou shalt not bear false witness. It's not thou shalt not lie. And I always wondered if there was a difference between those two things, both theologically and logically, etc. And in its original context, we often forget that the law, the law in the Hebrew Bible, was more than the Ten Commandments. It's 360 commandments, I think, or some such number. But that it was a set of laws that were designed to help a people live together. They covered everything, dress, clothes, but it was about living as a community. And many of the things that were dictated were to preserve order in community. And in its original form, it prohibits giving false testimony in a legal context. It addresses the idea of lying in judicial settings where someone's testimony, false testimony, could harm another person, especially in court of law. And the penalties in the Jewish law are pretty serious. So if you bear false witness and somebody gets stoned to death, you've really done them some harm. But it wasn't so much about what we think of about lying. As the title of the sermon, does this outfit make me look fat? Which is the classic joke about white lies and relationships used to be between the sexes, but I guess it still is. But in ancient Israel, a person's word in a legal context was very important because there were no written contracts. There were no complex legal systems. Bearing false witness could mean life or death, something we often forget. So this commandment was central to maintaining justice and social order. It was about social order, not about interactions between you and I or me and my friend about their outfit. Do not lie is a much more broad moral injunction, right? It means any kind of lying. It can mean bearing false witness, it can mean perjuring, but extends to all kinds of dishonesty, misleading statements, fabrications. And what people often forget is withholding the truth is also a lie. That's another form of lying. And it covers everything. It covers white lies, casual deceptions, any kind of deception or dishonesty. And the difference is the scope, really. Thou shalt not bear false witness was more specific to legal and formal settings. And I couldn't find, as I was looking into this, much commentary on whether or not how it extended beyond that setting in ancient times. And one assumes that didn't say, oh, we can't bear false witness, but we can lie. That's probably not correct. But it has specific use. And while the original context comes from social and legal communal justice, the simpler one is more personal, right? Do not lie. I mean, that's an easy one. And frankly, in my life, what I have learned through being involved with many people and seeing lots of relationships is the best way to kill a relationship is to start lying. Even simple lies, even white lies. If in relationships between two people, whether they be lovers, husband and wife, whatever, once you start to lie, that's the end. The end may take years to come, it may take short time to come, but it's going to come. Because the foundation of how we relate to each other needs to be based on trust, and lying destroys trust. Oh, I'm sorry I cheated on you, honey, I'll never do it again. Oh yeah, except forever the other party will think, I wonder if that's really true. And that lie, not so much the action of cheating, but that lying about it. Now gay men are looser, I guess, as a generality, in terms of how upset they are about monogamy than the straight couples that I was growing up. But nonetheless, it's the lie that often destroys the relationship, not the cheating. Because the lies lead to, oh, I found this message on your phone. What were you doing looking at my phone? All the things that unravel when you find out about a lie. Now, theologically, thou shalt not bear false witness is more profound sounding, but for most of us will never be called to bear witness against another person in a judicial setting, one hopes. So the commandment is more important in its simplified form. Jesus emphasized, when talking about the law, he said, I've not come to change a letter or a line in the law, meaning the broader law, but when was pressed about, well, what's the most important commandment? He said, to love the Lord thy God. But he said the second, which is like unto it, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, this commandment applies there too. Loving your neighbor is important, and lying is something that destroys that and can intentionally harm others. So it does go against what Jesus taught, even though he didn't say don't lie. But he did say love your neighbor, and you can't. But many of these moral things, they aren't separated. They're all very closely interwoven. We like to think of them as being discrete things, but they're not. So loving your neighbor has implications way beyond the obvious of taking care of them when they're sick, or being nice to them, or being kind to them. It revolves around how you approach life and how you approach your interactions with them. It's a higher standard. Christians are called, one would argue, to a higher standard of truthfulness. But by this idea of loving your neighbor. It's not just don't directly fabricate something. It's avoiding slander, gossip, false accusations. It means advocating for justice and fairness. It means promoting honest relationships, and it leads to social justice. It's not a long leap from not lying to social justice, because it's about fairness. It's about being just. Now, it's a generality where the commandment itself is more specific, legal, and related to community. So some could argue that equating thou shalt not bear false witness with do not lie diminishes the magnitude of the first one. Jesus certainly emphasized this without necessarily emphasizing the word lie or the word bear false witness. In the Old Testament, some of what we read here, there is much discussion about, or much you can refer to about dealing falsely. In Leviticus, you shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another, and you shall not swear by my name falsely, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. That's from Leviticus 11. And that's talking about honesty and integrity as part of the holiness code, part of the law, and part of the way you respect God. In Proverbs, we find there are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that hurry to run into evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discords among brothers. So all these things which the Proverbs say the Lord hates relate to lying. And it's far more weighty, which is why I started with the joke about, does this outfit make me look fat? White lies, it's just a little white lie, right? I mean, even young kids, parents say that to their children sometimes, usually to explain their behavior, not their children's behavior. But nonetheless, they say that, it's just a little white lie I told your mother because the dress does make her look fat, but don't tell her that. But white lies can be insidious too. It's condemned, and it's condemned in a broader sense in terms of how you relate to God. A leap that's not always obvious and not one we always make. Proverbs again says, a false witness will not go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will not escape. And there's more, but there are more references than when I started to search for them, I was surprised at references that I found. And then the New Testament references are a little bit less direct, but obviously in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, again you have heard it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. No, you shouldn't have to take an oath. You shouldn't have to hold your hand up and swear you're telling the truth. You should just tell the truth. Much easier. Like so many behavioral things and so many moral things, we make them harder than they have to be. I mean, obviously, bare knuckle truth is not always the right thing to do. Sometimes, even though this is not theologically correct, I would argue, yes, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to be careful to explain what you're saying to a person so it isn't just hurtful. But nonetheless, in general, it's easier to tell the truth. In Ephesians, we find, therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. So Paul is addressing the communal implications, but again saying that you should just be truthful. No, he doesn't say, except for when you don't think that's the right thing to say. That's not what it says. In James, he says, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening, both fresh and salt water? And that's a great one, because that's what we all do, right? We all proclaim that we are speaking, and we bless the Lord, and we bless people, and then we curse people. Well, you can't do both. I mean, if you're going to be, we all do both, and we all are human. But in what he's saying here is that you shouldn't, because it's destructive and dangerous. And then in Peter, 1 Peter, for whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. So all of these relate to the same idea that we're so good at separating things. Oh, I go to church on Sundays, and oh, I behave, and oh, I try and be a good person. And then I talk bad about my neighbors, or I really can't stand that girl I used to go out with in college, or that guy, and I tell about an asshole he or she was. But that's not lying, it's the truth, right? I mean, he was or she was. That's the subtlety that makes behaving hard. None of this is easy. I never want to be implied that I don't do it or that anybody doesn't do it. But the things that we can think about to make life and our relationships with others better. So although the broader scriptural context talks about a judicial setting, and we also obviously shouldn't bear false witness, but we should think about when we speak and how we speak, about whether or not we're telling the truth and whether or not we understand the implications if we're not. I think that it's the hardest thing today, God knows, coming off the election, talking about speaking the truth, for everyone involved in that, and not just the president-elect. But we need to think about those things. And then specifically, white lies, little white lies. This is my favorite part of this whole thing, because I think that everybody thinks, that's okay. It's okay. And it's not really. Motivation matters. Little white lies are often told with good intentions, such as sparing someone's feelings, i.e., you look great in that outfit, or avoiding unnecessary conflict. In such cases, we say, well, it's not malicious, it's not meant to harm anyone. But the key is little lies lead to big ones. That's the thing people overlook. It erodes trust, it fosters dishonesty as a habit, and it indirectly causes harm if the truth is later revealed. Almost all lies get found out. How many of you can think back over your life and say, I told this little white lie, and eventually it bit me in the butt? They do. And we justify things in many ways, but I think it's very important. I see this with younger people. I have young friends who just lie just as easily as they breathe. It's amazing to me. You're on the phone. Hi, I'm 2 stops away on the subway. You haven't left yet. You're a half an hour away if you leave now. But it never even occurs to them that that's a lie. And that leads to be very sort of grand sound, that leads to society's breakdown. But it really does. Because when you can't rely on something people say to you, as simple as why not, hi, I'm running late. It's okay. I mean, it's a fact, right? You are running late, so why not just say you're running late? Because I have a friend who does this all the time. I'll be there at 3 o'clock. Now, I didn't say be there at 3 o'clock. He said, I will be there at 3 o'clock. And he shows up at 5 o'clock. I said, why not? I got busy, and I've told you, not to wait. I said, how can I not wait on you? I was doing things. I came home to meet you here at 3 o'clock. Oh, well, I've told you not to. I mean, people who are like that don't like to get caught or don't like to be called out on it. But I said, it's that. He doesn't think it's a lie. No, it's not. It's even worse. You just don't care about anybody else. That's an even worse thing. But nonetheless, it begins with this idea of little mistruths and little lies that you can justify by saying, oh, well, I didn't want to insult the person, or I didn't want to make them angry, or I didn't see any real point in getting into this, It's not true that way. And I repeat, and we're all grown-ups, but particularly for younger people who are beginning relationships with others, whether they be romantic or business, whatever, it is guaranteed. I've never seen it fail, that it will break down your relationship. Now, sometimes you can recover it, but it's never the same. And there's a reason why it's not a good idea to lie. Now, I tell people, I said it to them, and they say, you never lie? I said, no, of course I lie. Everybody lies. But I didn't say it right. I try not to. I make a sincere effort not to. And I'm pretty good at it, and that's sometimes people think I'm an asshole. But nonetheless, I am pretty good at it. But I try. Sometimes it's longer not to lie. Well, let me tell you what I really mean. Sometimes you have to put it in context. But it means at least I can look myself in the mirror and say, I don't have to worry that next week somebody else who was there that night will pop up unexpectedly and say something, all the things that trip us up. So the only other thing I looked at when did it get simplified? It got simplified by the Christians, not the Jews, and it got simplified as we wanted to expand Christianity and make it simpler. So when we started teaching Sunday school, thou shalt not lie was easier to understand than thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not commit adultery is better than thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. And again, even there, some of the commandments, as I was talking about this sermon with someone, why is coveting a sin? Well, because it leads to social breakdown. It's not, really nothing harmful about wanting someone else's house, except it leads to the desire to do something about that. And that's why, when you look at the commandments in their original form, they really, you're saying, well, why is that a sin? But there's reason, because they existed, again, we always have to look at Scripture in context, in time, and they existed as a set of social codes for a rather, in our minds, uncivilized or pre-civilized people who didn't have contracts, who, for better or for worse, probably for better, didn't have lawyers, didn't have a Supreme Court. They solved their differences locally, and they relied on, if they said to someone what happened, that someone said what happened. So keep that in mind, that even though we've simplified the Ten Commandments down to easier to understand and condensed for memorization and for teaching children about rote words, not necessarily about meaning, that happened. But it doesn't change the fact that these things had a reason in the beginning, and the reason's often deeper than we think about it. And I don't think it should be burden anyone. I don't feel that way. I don't think you should worry about everything you say, constantly being on guard. But it becomes easier if you think about it once in a while, and then don't do it. Because as I say to people, I don't lie much, and that's why it's a lot easier for me to say things. Because I don't have to worry about what I'm doing. And occasionally I get tripped up, and occasionally I get in trouble because I don't lie. But I feel better for it. And in most cases, right behavior, whatever that may be, makes you feel good. Makes God feel good, makes your neighbors feel good, but mostly it makes you feel good. In all things, behaving can be something you do for your own benefit. And that's one of the things that makes it easier, that people forget. It doesn't have to be hard. So keep that in mind, and don't ask people if the dress makes you, or the outfit makes you look fat. Then they don't have to lie to you. Because you know full well that the chances are, most people are going to say, oh yeah, it looks lovely. What is she thinking, or he thinking? So that's one of the other ways you can do it yourself. You don't induce people to lie. And then, because you're partially responsible then. So I hope that little discourse on the commandment and lying, which covered a lot of ground theologically and otherwise, was interesting, but I think it's a marvelous subject to think about just in general when I got nothing else to think about, which is not often lately, but nonetheless, when you have a minute, these are the kind of things I think it's worth pondering. Amen.